Now let's move on to the music bus. And this subgroup contains all our musical elements and sound effects. Now, there's not a lot of extra processing that was done for this subgroup because most of it was converted audio. And that included all the processing that made up that sound. And that makes it easier to play back, and it saves computer resources, and it ensures that the sound stayed exactly as we wanted. Now this first growl track is muted. We're going to actually pull that down. That's the original growl that we wrote, and then we had this alternate pattern that we ended up using in the final mix. And again, as you can see on the alternate growl track, the synth chords and the synth accents, there's no additional processing that was used. Now on this mod synth track, that's that electro pipe element that we used, there was a lot of brightness in the sound, and what we did was add a channel EQ to kind of lower that a little bit in some of the higher frequency ranges, just to kind of not make it so sharp. We also added some reverb with that big room and a quarter note delay. You can see I bypassed bus 6 as we were auditioning between the quarter note and eighth note delay. You can play around with each one. We ended up going with the quarter note delay, and that was when it was used in the final mix. Now for the reverse effects track, we simply just added some of that big room reverb. Now for the sweeps, this is the original processing chain that we had, and nothing was added during the final mix except some of the big room reverb. Now we still have this noise effects track, but we're going to wait to automate this later when we get to automation. But we did add some big room reverb to that noise track. What I can do is option click the bus or any other insert to bypass and compare that effect. We still have the side chain, and there's no additional processing for that since that's just triggering the compressor on that noise track. And then on the main music bus for that entire subgroup, there's no additional processing on that track either. So let's listen to all the musical elements together. So we've gone over the drum group, the bass group, and the music group. And before we move on to the vocals, I want to talk a little bit about the three-dimensional space that we've created with the processing and effects. Now for the drums and the bass, they're really up front in the mix and kind of in your face. Then some of the musical elements are created a little bit more spatial imagery with some of the wetness of the effects. So with those sweep effects and a lot of the sound effects having a lot of that big room reverb, they were really washed and put way back in the mix. And the combination of all this really created that three-dimensional space. I've also created another subgroup for all my send effects. That's going to allow us to adjust all of those effects in the mix, and also I'm going to add that in, and you can really hear the space that the send effects are providing.